We're just going to hold on for a few minutes to let some people join the meeting.
Oh,
We're starting to get some people in. We're just going to give everyone a couple more minutes and then we'll start the meeting. Thanks for being. Well, we're going to go ahead and start for time's sake, but hi and welcome to the Six Forks Road Improvement Project Virtual Open House. Tonight, Chad Cantrell, the project manager for this project, will give a presentation. And then we'll answer some questions you may have about the project. We ask that questions be posted on the chat box and we will answer them after the presentation. If you have questions about how the project may impact your property or your business, we have set up virtual office hours. There is a link to sign up for one-on-one sessions with the project manager available on the virtual website or on the virtual public meeting open house. And now I'd like to introduce Chad Cantrell, the project manager. Chad?
thank you. Good evening, everybody. And again, welcome to the Design Open House. We appreciate you joining us here tonight. And this is for the Six Forks Road Improvement Project. And again, I am Chad Cantrell, the project manager from the city of Raleigh. On the line with us, we also have our consultant. Is RK&K We have Jeff here from our K&K. And from our real estate office, we have Sarah Beth and Dustin as well. Apologize, I'm having some issues, mouse issues. Back about 3 or 4 years ago, the city commissioned a corridor study of Six Forks that extended from the Beltline up to Lynn Road. The corridor went through several public engagement sessions and was looking for input on the vision of what Six Forks should look like in the future here. And out of that corridor study, we had several plans that we looked at and helped essentially provide a master plan for our design moving forward into this next step where we are at design. And the corridor study was adopted by council in 2018. As far as project location, as mentioned before, the Six Forks corridor study had looked at the entire section of Six Forks from 440 to Lynn Road. However, in order to make this a more manageable project, what we're presenting tonight is Rowan Street to Lynn Road with a little bit of work at Revere Drive and Rowan Street. The portion from 440 to Rowan Street would be a future project once funding became available. Existing conditions, obviously the roadway section varies quite a bit. If you've driven up and down Six Forks, it goes from 2 lanes to 3 lanes to 2 lanes and can be very confusing from a driver expectation standpoint. Currently, there are no restrictions on turns. People can freely make left turns out of side streets onto Six Forks. The existing lanes south of Millbrook tend to be on the more narrow side, a little under 9 feet. And as you get close to Millbrook, get closer to 10 feet, and up around Lynn Road are back to 11 feet. There are currently sidewalks on both sides, but no real bicycle accommodations. Most people that we see cycling along the corridor are using the sidewalks. At Millbrook Road, there is currently a speed limit change from 35 miles per hour to 45 miles per hour. Corridor character, obviously a lot of different uses along the corridor. The south end is very commercial, a lot of office space intermixed along the corridor, as well as some older residential neighborhoods, several schools and churches. And this is considered the gateway to Midtown, as well as the nearby North Hills Shopping Center. Project purpose for this, again, going back to the corridor study, the overall goal was to improve safety and mobility for all users, be it cars, pedestrians, cyclists, transit users. And so there's a little bit of everything for everybody in this project. As in regards to cars, we are increasing roadway capacity to deal with current and projected growth. We are also providing separated bike and pedestrian facilities to increase access and mobility for those users, and upgrading transit facilities along the way. Project challenges, obviously, Six Forks started as a much smaller road, and over the years, it's widened as traffic has increased and the community has grown. So several of the businesses and homes are already really close to the existing road. So that's definitely a challenge that we work through. Lots of driveways along the corridor that present their own challenges when working with bike and pedestrian facilities behind the curb, where you typically want those all at one elevation instead of dipping down for every driveway along the route. North of Millbrook, we start running into several major water pipelines that deliver water from the nearby water storage tank on Six Forks. And almost every day, a new utility company seems like they're out there installing fiber. So there is a lot of existing utilities out there that will present a challenge as we move through design. the proposed design. After this presentation, I'll pull up a pretty quick animation that shows this in a lot greater detail. But we are providing 3 lanes of travel in each direction with a grass median, with a vegetated median. In some areas where we don't have water infrastructure, we will be looking at suitable plantings that comply with both DOT and city requirements, so not just grass. On each side of the road, instead of the typical 10-foot wide multi-use path that you may have seen around the city, we will have a separate 5-foot bikeway as well as a separate 6-foot sidewalk that will have a 6-foot planting strip between the two of those. Design updates. Since we last met, we've reviewed, we've discussed and reviewed with NCDOT some exceptions, some differences from the previous design. In this example here, we've reduced the median width about 5.5 feet, and NCDOT is approving a 10-foot lane width, which for NCDOT, who is typically associated with highways as opposed to local roads, 11-foot is their standard lane width. However, our design guidelines under AASHTO do allow for 10-foot lanes, and several studies along the way have shown no increases in accidents. I know there's been some concern from residents on the 10-foot lanes, and they are consistent along the corridor. And these design updates have allowed us to reduce the overall width of the right-of-way to not only limit impacts to the adjoining properties, but also reduce the amount of time it takes for pedestrians and cyclists to cross an intersection. And as part of that agreement with NCDOT, we are reducing the speed limit north of Millbrook Road from 45 miles per hour to 35 miles per hour. So it'll be a consistent speed between Rowan and Lynn Road. On the project website, you will see our detailed design maps. In those, we've detailed out not only the main road, but the side streets as well, on essentially how far back we'll be working on these to make everything tie into Six Forks. We also show driveway cuts and the anticipated limits of work for those. And on these maps, you will see our projected right-of-way and easement needs. And if you are living along the corridor, you should be receiving shortly a letter from our real estate office with an easement exhibit. And we encourage you to reach out to the office hours available next week to if you want to discuss any of those property impacts. Just a little bit about median safety. Again, another item of concern for folks, you know, who have historically been able to make left turns across Six Forks. And we know it adds a little more inconvenience and time for you to drive for not being able to make a left turn, I should say. But overall, the reason we're adding medians is the large reduction in crashes associated with those left turns. And it really minimizes the right angle or broadside collisions, as well as providing a refuge for pedestrians that may not necessarily be able to cross the intersection in a single light change. One other difference, again, as I alluded to, is we do have separated bikeways on the project. And the example here on the screen is at Sandy Forks, and it shows, you know, in an ideal situation where we have existing bike lanes, the transition from our bikeway on Six Forks to those existing bike lanes. And the bicycle path is intended for one-way travel. And at intersections, cyclists and pedestrians will have separate crosswalks. Talk a little bit about protected intersections. All of the 10 signalized intersections along the corridor will be designed as protected intersections. And going back to the overall goal of the project, improving safety for all users, the protected intersections increased visibility of cyclists and pedestrians crossing. And we'll pull up an example here. This is at the corner of Millbrook and Six Forks. As you can see by the gray hatched area, the inside radius is slightly smaller, and that is designed for passenger vehicles to slow them down on making a right turn and approach the crosswalk at more of a perpendicular angle to be able to see pedestrians that may be waiting or crossing the crosswalk at that location. However, that island, the gray hatched area, is mountable with another curb set behind it to accommodate our larger vehicles like semi trucks. And in addition, you'll see that these crosswalks are set back a lot further than you're used to. And that ties back into our protected intersection design of increasing visibility for people or cyclists crossing the road. As part of this project, we will be improving transit stops. We'll be consolidating to these locations shown on the map with options for crossing transit routes, both at Lynn Road, Millbrook Road, and Northbrook Road, where other service lines may come into the same shelter. At those locations, we will have enhanced shelters to handle the cross transit routes. One other change from our last meeting, the roundabout at Rowan Street and Revere Drive has been detailed as shown on the plan here. And not only does it improve traffic calming for the neighborhood, it will also reduce congestion on Six Forks for vehicles that currently wait to make a left turn into Carroll Middle School. This will require them to do a U-turn around the roundabout to get into the school's drop-off parking lot. You may be seeing our consultant and their surveyors out soon, but we identified a gap in the storm infrastructure on Six Forks, and in order to avoid standing water on Six Forks or sending water overland through North Glen, we would be extending a storm line down North Glen to I believe that's Glen Eagle down there to an existing stormwater system. So you will see us back out for that. Also part of the project on the plans, we've identified several areas for potential green stormwater infrastructure. These areas will treat stormwater runoff from the road, typically removing nitrogen, oil, and other pollutants that come off the road prior to entering our streams. In addition to that, we'll probably be looking at other smaller systems along the corridor, similar to what we may have used on Hillsborough Street with the Silvacell planting boxes. But as we progress in design, we will finalize those locations and what devices we'll be using. And then also for those commercial properties that may be reevaluating their parking needs after the COVID pandemic, just like to reach out and let people know that there is the Raleigh Rainwater Rewards Program to help offset some costs for installing green stormwater infrastructure if some of that parking is no longer needed. So, and happy to put you in touch with our stormwater folks if anyone is interested. As part of this design, we've finished our vertical design enough to know that several roads will need temporary road closures and detours, which are listed here on this slide. As design progresses, we will be able to give you more of an idea on what those detour routes will look like, as well as phasing of the work. project schedule. We are anticipating going to City Council later this fall to present the project and receive authorization to begin real estate negotiations towards the end of the year, with a planned completion next summer, as well as advertising for construction in the same time frame, with a late fall start and a completion in fall 2024. And as Tiffany mentioned earlier, we'd like to get your feedback on the design, what we presented tonight, the documents that are on the website, short animation I'll present here shortly, and just ask that you go to raleighnc.gov and search for the Six Forks Improvement Project. And under that will be a link to the virtual open house where you're able to provide feedback. And that survey does close on October 17th. And after that, we will start compiling your feedback and putting together responses. And I am at the end of the presentation, Tiffany. I was just going to pull up the animation real quick. I've got it stopped at the actual animation. So let me try to share that screen.
Sounds great, Chad.
And just let me know if the audio doesn't come through on this one.
This is an animation of what the project will look like once it is complete. As we said earlier, the project limits are between Rowan Street and Lynn Road. As you will see in the animation, there are several design elements revised from our last public engagement. The biggest one is the reduction of the overall width of the project. We reduced the typical cross-section by 8.5 feet to minimize impacts to adjacent properties and reduce the overall width crossing the street. The corridor design study recommended 10-foot wide lanes as they would be more appropriate for this section of the corridor, provided a 35-mile-per-hour speed is maintained.
Oh, apologize. I think I hit the wrong button, trying to turn up the volume.
Welcome to the elements revised from our last public engagement. The biggest one is the reduction of the overall width of the project. We reduced the typical cross-section by 8.5 feet to minimize impacts to adjacent properties and reduce the overall width for pedestrians crossing the street. The corridor design study recommended 10-foot wide lanes as they would be more appropriate for this section of the corridor, provided a 35-mile-per-hour speed is maintained. As part of the design process since the last public engagement, we worked with NCDOT to allow a speed reduction from 45 miles per hour to 35 miles per hour between the Millbrook Road and Lynn Road to support that 10-foot wide lanes over the 11-foot wide lanes. Based on recent study, 10-foot wide lanes with 35 miles per hour speed limit provide a mild traffic calming effect without an increase in traffic-related crashes. The detailed designs are now available for the side streets and the driveways along the corridor. If you live adjacent to the corridor and there is a proposed impact to your property, a preliminary survey exhibit has been mailed out by our real estate department. If you have received one of these exhibits, we encourage you to reach out to us after the meeting to review these impacts together. The exhibits show the largest anticipated impact to the property, and we anticipate that as the design progresses, some of these impacts can be lessened by walls or other features. The biggest change to the corridor will be the installation of a median with left turn lanes at signalized intersections. This will replace the two-way left turn lane that exists through most of the corridor today. A dedicated left turn lane allows drivers to safely make a left turn and allows the through traffic to flow more freely, providing a safer corridor for vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. The median will also allow for pedestrian refuge at intersections. Did you know that medians reduce the number of pedestrian-related accidents by up to 45%? The median will also restrict left turns onto Six Forks Road from any location where it is currently allowed, and is intended to reduce the number of broadside accidents caused by vehicles turning left across several lanes of traffic. U-turns will be allowed at most of the signalized intersections. Medians reduce the overall number of crashes by up to 57% and reduce the severity of crashes when compared to two-way left turn lanes. We understand that restricting left turns where people have historically been able to turn left can be upsetting to residents, and that travel may be less convenient for those living along the corridor. But several studies within the state and around the country show large reductions in crashes and fatalities after installing a median. While center two-way left turn lanes can work in some situations, drivers frequently misuse them and reduce the overall safety of the road. Separated bike and pedestrian paths were recommended in the original design study. Both of these paths will be located behind the curb to improve safety and mobility. Unlike recently installed 10-foot wide multi-use paths on other city projects that combine cyclists and pedestrians, the separated dedicated bike path will be 5 feet wide and is intended for one-way travel. A separate 6-foot wide sidewalk will be available for pedestrians. Cyclists will also have separate crossings at protected intersections. Protected intersections will be constructed at all proposed signalized intersections within the project corridor. The goal of protected intersection is to improve the visibility of crossing cyclists and pedestrians to drivers. Protected intersections may be new to Raleigh, but have been successfully installed around the country and show safety improvements for cyclists and pedestrians. I hope you enjoyed this animation. Now let's go back to the slides. The corridor study identified the need.
After that, I believe Tiffany, ready to start answering some questions or reviewing questions.
Sure thing. All right, we have one question here. Is the project, or sorry, is there a projected date yet for this to be presented to City Council for final approval?
We don't have a final date selected yet, but we're anticipating late this fall.
Okay. And then this is kind of a long question, so bear with me. I live on Wendell Drive. In earlier version of the quarter plan, I noticed a stoplight at Wendell and Six Forks. New version shows a right turn lane only at Wendell and Six Forks. I really like this new option. Additionally, I would like to know if traffic calming issues concerning Wendell Drive cut through traffic are being considered. Since Wendell is the last street before Millbrook, how can we keep unnecessary traffic from being forced down Wendell in a safe manner in order to get around the Millbrook Six Forks traffic light?
Sure, and we have a neighborhood traffic management group that typically handles traffic calming issues that come up. And they typically like to do a baseline level survey first of the existing traffic conditions before beginning a project. And then I think there was some alternative routes possibly. Do you recall what those were, Jeff?
Yeah, just looking at the public meeting map, if you're headed northbound on Six Forks, headed to eastbound on Millbrook, you know, that would still be a cut through that exists now after this project is over. But if you're headed westbound on Millbrook to southbound on Six Forks, the proposed median on Six Forks will no longer allow that movement to turn left onto southbound Six Forks.
Thanks. Yeah, and obviously we'll be working with our neighborhood traffic management group if problems do arise.
That's great. Okay. There is concern about some slip lanes and bike and pedestrian safety. Can anyone kind of talk about that question?
Yeah. I believe we have only one slip lane, well, two at Lynn Road. Let me pull up the map to double check. And that's definitely something, after talking with some other groups, be happy to revisit and see if there's potential to minimize those. They're fairly typical design, but I understand some of the concern with the bike and pedestrian interactions on slip lanes. Again, it encourages drivers to make a right turn fairly quickly.
Okay. Next question is there a left turn at Glen? Is it Glen Forks? Is it Glen?
Oh, North Glen, maybe?
Yes, North Glen. North
Yeah.
Glen, off of Six Forks.
Yeah. And that was something, that came up at the CAC meeting, I believe earlier this week. And it looks like it was incorrectly shown and on the maps that are on the project website. The intent was to allow left turns at the signal at North Glen, as well as northbound U-turns at that same signal.
Okay. And then is there someplace in town we can view these hatched sections installed at intersections? And will all bus stops have shelters? So I guess that's first one is there someplace in town we can view these hatched sections installed at intersections?
Not yet. I believe our Blue Ridge project will have one of the first protected intersections in North Carolina, and will go to construction, I believe, before us, although we'll have 10 of them. But we look to our sister cities say in Portland and Seattle and other locations across the U.S. that have successfully installed these applications. But that might be something good that we can add to the website is some real life pictures.
Definitely take note of that. I'll see what I can find.
Yeah. And then will all bus stops have shelters? And the
Yes.
answer is yes. And benches and trash cans. And at the enhanced bus shelters, we are also looking at incorporating the Citrix bike shares location. So.
Okay, and that's actually all the questions I have right now. Any other questions out there? Chad, can you think of any of the questions that maybe you got during the other public meeting that you attended for the CIC group?
Yeah, some answers I still need to track down. I'm just sticking with the transit theme. There was some questions about why was there enhanced transit service at Rowan Street as opposed to the Capitol Towers location, which sees higher bus traffic. So it's definitely something I'll be reviewing with our transit group.
Okay, we did get another one in. Do I understand correctly that the neighborhood entrance wells for North Cliff will be preserved?
That's definitely something
Walls.
Yeah, the walls. Yeah, it's something we need to look at. Obviously, we'll be impacting them, and we'll be working with our real estate group on that. I think the issue that we're running into, in particular with those walls, are they're currently installed on the two private properties on either side of North Cliff. And there is no HOA that could potentially take ownership of those walls or an easement for those walls. So definitely stuff that we still need to work through on how we're addressing those.
Okay, I have another one. Will Cranbrook and North Glen be joined by an angled intersection?
That's something we'll have to take a little deeper look at. At first glance, it just does not seem feasible. It will set up a fairly awkward intersection that may not perform well for vehicles or other users, but something we'll definitely review.
Give it a couple seconds for any other questions. So you said protected intersections were in sister cities such as Portland.
Yeah, a lot of bike-friendly cities, and we can get some installed examples up on the website. It feels like so.
Okay. Any other questions out there?
If not, I got a couple others I can.
That would be great.
Looking at. Okay. So one of the other topics that frequently comes up that we're looking into is there a lot of concern about not only disallowing right turn on red, but also appropriate signage for U-turn movements and those folks that may be making a right turn on red if we're unable to sign it, no right turn on red. That came out a little awkward. So essentially two separate issues that we're looking at is signing the corridor as no right turn on red, and if not, making sure there's appropriate signage at an intersection on who has priority between a U-turn and a right turn.
I do have another question that came up. What happened to the large trees along Sixth Fork?
Yeah, unfortunately, with as wide of a footprint that we have on this project, a lot of those trees will be removed. We will be replacing them with other street trees where feasible. But one of the issues we'll run into is having a street tree that's appropriate not only for NCDOT for crash concerns, but small enough that it won't be an issue for the overhead power lines.
Okay, and I do have another question. Dublin is closed temporarily. There are limited options to access homes and townhomes in that area, primarily a small street. Shaywood off Sandy Forks is Shaywood off of Sandy Forks. Is there any consideration to limit speed or traffic on Shaywood?
Yeah, that would definitely be something we look at as we start to develop our traffic control plans. That would include detours as well as what those impacts would be to the side streets for the detour.
Okay.
But more to come on that as we get further in design.
Okay. And you want to throw out another question you might have gotten while we wait for some more?
Sure. Let's see here. One other item that came up at our meeting last night is the neighborhood bike plan does call for bike lanes on Rowan Street. So that we'll have to revisit some of the items that we show on the current road maps that don't account for those the bike lanes. And those bike lanes extend, I believe, from Six Forks to Revere Drive, and after Revere Drive, the bike master plan shows share roads.
Okay. Any other questions out there from the folks joining us tonight? Looks like we have another question coming up. Nope. All right. So we're not really seeing many more questions. We will have this meeting recorded. It will be back on this engagement portal after tomorrow morning. It'll be up on the engagement site tomorrow morning, as well as a transcript. If you need that, we can get that to you as well. We do have another meeting next week. So if you come up with any questions, please join us again next week, or even just shoot us a question in the chat and we will try and get that back to you as soon as we can. If you haven't already visited the virtual open house, please do. If you do, like I said, if you have some questions about your individual properties or business and how this project might affect it, please do look into signing up for one of the one-on-one sessions with Chad, and he will talk you through some of the possible things to lessen those impacts as well. If we don't see any more questions, I guess we can go ahead and wrap up tonight's meeting. And I want to say thank you to everyone for coming.
And just to reiterate Tiffany's point, most of the due to the size of the project, most of the properties along Six Forks will have some impact in some way. So even if you don't receive an exhibit this week, I do encourage you to sign up for those open office hours next week, and happy to review that in detail. And I appreciate everybody joining us here tonight and providing feedback on the project.
Thank you so much.